Well, good morning, church. Miranda Congregational. Welcome to today's service, 21st of August. I think our 8th service in lockdown, and on the weekend where we've been advised that we've probably got another 4 weeks of lockdown. So wherever you're watching this in your home, live streamed or delayed broadcast, hope you enjoy the message this morning from our two pastors on work. And as we face the next 4 weeks together, I implore you to trust in your God, uphold yourself and the rest of our community in prayer, and reach out to each other and support each other. For me, I just want to give a shout out to a good friend of mine, Andrew Hoff. Throughout the lockdown, both last year and this year, he's been my training partner. So I'm down here at Cronulla at 5:45 this morning, and I'll be meeting him in about 15 minutes, and we'll do our 45 minutes of workout. Then I'll have a swim, and then I'll be off home to watch the service. Anyway, I hope you're looking after yourself and continue to reach out and support each other in these difficult times.
In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. In the silence, you won't let go. In the questions, your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore. Tomorrow brings. With each morning I'll rise and sing. My God's love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. Oh, you are my light, my lighthouse, shining in the darkness. To shore, safe to shore.
We haven't met before. My name is James Folland, and some of the announcements about what's happening in the life of MCC whilst we are in lockdown is the cottage has been updated and upgraded after it's been vacated. So a big thank you to Craig Fitzpatrick, because the majority of the floor needed to be replaced, and that piece of work is almost finished. We've also updated the links to various meetings that are happening during the week on the website, so you can find those Zoom links there on the website. We also have the opportunity to continue giving to the life and work of MCC. The details can either be found in your bulletin, or I'll quickly put them up on the screen here as well for you to be able to see those if you want to set up giving online. Otherwise, you're able to save up and give at the time when we are able to meet again in person. Next week, Heath will be sharing with us on Christians and COVID, and the week after, Jeremy will be doing a Father's Day special. We will be unable to meet as planned on the 29th of August for the church meeting, so we'll be looking at how we can do something like that in the future as a leadership team, and we'll be putting plans in place in light of the current lockdown situation. We look forward to being able to welcome everyone back into the building when we meet again, as you can see in my virtual background here. After this, we'll also be continuing with another song.
Christ is my reward and all of my devotion. Now there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. Through every trial, my soul will sing, no turning back. I've been set free. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. my home. Through every storm, my soul will sing, Jesus is here. To God be the glory. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. And Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. No turning back. No turning back.
Welcome. And this is our third week of talking about when we meet again. So Jeremy is here with me. Together we're going to share the third W. You might remember in the first week that I did worship. That as we come together as God's people, as we gather, our focus is not on ourselves, but we want to focus our hearts and our minds, our bodies, our spirit, our soul, everything that God has given to us, to love him with everything and to focus on him as we come together. And then Jeremy did the word.
Yeah, so we looked at, if you remember, I'm not sure if I remember, but we looked at that mandate to preach truth. And not only for Heath and I, as pastors and the main preachers in the church, but all of us, that responsibility. And I think if I remember, we talked about, we might have a pulpit, but everyone has a platform in which we can communicate truth. Yeah.
Yep. And on our website and Facebook, you'll have noticed that there's been some daily devotions just to help us focus on God each day, and also just a couple of very practical tips on how can we get into the Word and how can we prepare our hearts for worship as individuals before we meet again. So today we're actually doing the third W. The third W is the work. How does God work in us when we gather together as a result of worshipping him and hearing from him in his word? What will that look like? So Jeremy kicks off.
Cool, beautiful. So I think we're looking at, so we had 3 W's, and I think today we've got 3 R's. So it helps us probably more than yourself maybe, but looking firstly at the work of God in the context of revelation. And what a beautiful thing it is to receive revelation. Revelation is simply the revealing of truth. And whether that be in worship, we get a revelation. I don't know if you've ever been singing or engaged with God in worship, and you have a thought. And in fact, somebody I think once said, good songs should develop good theology. And so, often I remember we used to sing scripture in song. You're singing the scriptures, and they speak to you in that worship, and you get that revelation. God reveals something of himself, his character, his nature, or something. God speaks to you about something that he wants to do, a work in your life. And same with the word of God. We're listening to the preacher. Many times, you're listening to the preacher, and the preacher might not be saying much, but through the text yourself as you're reading it, or just the Spirit of God, puts his finger on something or speaks to you about something, and you get that revelation.
Yep, and that's definitely been my experience. In the old days, I used to stand at the door and people would come and say, God really convicted me about this, and I think I need to do that. And I'm always thinking, I didn't say any of that. But God has used scripture and the time that we've had together to be able to do his work in the person as they are about to enter into the rest of their week. And God's spoken to them, and they're working and wrestling with what that would look like. And that's the revelation that they have. And for music, as someone who lives inside the head in terms of intellect and thinking through things a lot, music's always been one of the ways that God really reveals his presence to me, because it kind of shortcuts that mental agility and gymnastics that I do sometimes. So you can suddenly find yourself getting caught up. So there's a couple of songs which I can't sing all the way through because they remind me of how God was really present in certain parts of life. And I know that's true for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's interesting, like often as a preacher, we prepare and you deliver a sermon, and I guess some people afterwards they want to come up and they say, oh, that was fantastic, or they don't say anything at all. Sometimes it's best when they don't say anything at all. Think, what was that song? You say it best when you say nothing at all.
Yeah.
But I think I'm always willing to be challenged, but I'm also willing when people say, hey, that was great. Just that question there, that response. What was great about it? Was there something in particular that when the preacher said that or preached that or declared that, what was it about that, And often I find it's a good conversation starter. Absolutely. And sometimes they're getting that revelation. I mean, I've been in church, you get a revelation, but then you're not sure what to do with it. Hey, thank you for that. I really got something out of that. Okay, is there an action? And I guess that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there an action then that accompanies that revelation? What do you do with that revelation? Most of us know, once lunchtime's over, we've forgotten about the sermon, or even forgotten about that prompting of the Holy Spirit or that revelation, and then the business of life. And before you know it, the week's gone by and it's a distant memory at best,
And look, it's really hard, I think, to do it individually, to say, what is God saying to me? Now, I can't imagine how many times this has happened for me, and it's probably happened for you, that you, even in your own devotions and scripture, you read something that you might have read 100 times, let's say something from the Gospels, but God impresses something new from the same passage that you've read. He impresses something new on your heart. Well, what do you do with that? That's the revelation, and that may well happen, on our own, but it definitely will happen when we're in church together. And as Jeremy said, people say, oh, that was great. Well, what was great about it? What was it? And some people can actually get down to, I understood this verse for the first time, that what it meant for me. Or they might say, I just wrote down something that you said that was really helpful. And then we can follow that up. But well, how's it going to be helpful? What difference is it going to make? If God is speaking to us, what will we do in return? Whether he's speaking to us through a song that we've sung, or through the Bible that was read, the prayers that are offered, even communion and baptisms, which can be powerful words, really, can't they? A powerful word of testimony from baptism and other options. What are we going to do with that? So that's the revelation that comes from the worship and the word that we have together. What's the work of God? And so we've been talking about how do we actually help nail that down? How can we embed that into our life? And you were the one that came up with our second R.
Just before we get to that second R, I was thinking, one of the interesting things that often happens, I mean, we think about ourselves and revelation as an individual. What's God said to you? What's God said to you? The interesting thing, and look, it's not all the time, but there has been times when I'll have been listening to a preacher, or I've been in worship, and I feel God's revealed something to me. And then I talk about it with someone else, and they say, you know what? I had the same thought. You know, I had that same conviction, or I had that same, sense of awareness. And in actual fact, I remember in a church I was in a while ago, we actually gave people the opportunity to engage in an exercise where we said, over the next 2 months, in the worship and in the preaching and in the small groups, and looking at the whole week, write down, journal some things that God's speaking to you about, and then we'll come back together. We incorporated that sort of season with fasting as well, and it was interesting that at the end of that 2 months when we came together, and most of us did it in the small groups we were in, but the amount of revelation that people were receiving, that was similar. And it was, I think, what we worked out, that actually God's talking to our church.
Yeah, definitely.
And as well as individually, but God's speaking to us as a church, as a community. And then out of that, we were able to say to each other, well, what course of action should we take? You know, what's the best way to respond to this? So I think in terms of revelation, and again, I was thinking of a story. I'll just tell a quick story. In terms of revelation, because there's a whole range of revelation. The other R that we had was
we had
repentance.
Repentance and regeneration and renewal. We had all kinds of R's here.
So there's an R in here. Yeah, there's
Exactly.
an R. So we, I was thinking about revelation and what a beautiful thing it is when people, the revelation that people have is the revelation of their sin and their standing with God. And I remember, I tell this story because you'll know, I don't know if I've told this story before, but it was probably 25 years ago. I was preaching in a church called Campbelltown City Church. I was the youth pastor. And I preached that Sunday morning, and I gave an altar call, an opportunity for people to respond if they didn't know Jesus Christ. And I can't remember the language I used. It probably would have been the language around, if you would like to know more about Jesus, why don't you come see me after the service? Well, at that point, this guy stood up. He was sort of in the middle of the auditorium and literally came running.
Wow.
Have I told you this story?
I don't think you have. No,
Came
it's a good
running
one.
down the altar. Now, he was a fit, athletic type of guy. He was also a coloured guy.
Yeah.
And, okay, so it's Campbelltown, and my first thought was security. Well, this big, athletic, black guy comes running for me, and I don't mean any respect there. And we had security at the church, actually. So the security quickly came, and but then he just fell to his knees at the front of the stage and started crying and weeping, and then I kind of realised, okay, something of God's happening here. He's not coming to stab me or something, which we'd had. But when I got to talk to him, it was he said, I got to become a Christian.
Yeah.
What is this all about, Now, you will know this guy because he was part of our church for a few months. It was Jed.
There you go.
He lived in the cottage for a while there.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I spent time, many months, discipling him. And then he went to Bible college. They went to India, planted a church. They've come back, and so it's amazing what can happen. The work of God coming out of worship, coming out of the Word, in that space of revelation. Who knows what God is wanting to do? And that He's calling us to partner with.
And look, the great thing is, and I think God secretly delights in it, that sometimes when we feel like we've done our worst, God is working at His best. I mean, that doesn't mean that we should have sloppy preparation or poor music or, just rubbishy types of meetings. But what it does mean is that you can always count on God to surprise us. You reminded me of two stories. But the one that I really love was that a lady had invited a friend to come and hear her public testimony before she got baptised. This is in Gordon Baptist Church. This is awesome. They're like in their 40s. And her friend got up and suddenly realised she had an incredible fear of public speaking. And she stood there for a full, not 20 seconds, not 40 seconds, 2.5 minutes, without saying anything, and then sat down. And she's thinking, this is awful. I brought my friend here for the first time. She's never going to come back to church. At the end of that time, her friend came up to her and says, I think I'm going to become a Christian. And she goes, why? And she goes, because you were willing to stand there and make a complete fool of yourself.
Wow.
So this God must be worth following. And I'm thinking, that's typical of God. That was the revelation that her friend thought was the one that actually just tipped her over the edge towards becoming a believer.
Wow.
So it's an amazing. Now, we're not saying that we should do that, but God is a way of doing it, and he can
Yeah.
do it through the great things as well as the bad. So there are story after story that we could tell where that sort of thing has happened.
I mean, it's interesting. It's the foolishness of preaching that Paul talks about.
Yeah.
But it's the foolishness sometimes of our actions
Yeah.
and some of the things that we engage in that can look foolish and silly, you know. Those of you know that my wife, she doesn't like silly. Surprised we've been married for 25 years. She doesn't like silly. She doesn't like that, you know, that kind of stuff. But God can work in that, can't he?
Oh, absolutely.
And, I mean, it's all of that sort of language and that engagement that we have in our church services. You know, the preaching, communion, you know, the singing, and it's foreign to some people.
Oh, it's completely
and it looks
alien.
silly, yeah.
Yeah.
But God can be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Mike Frost, who some of you might know, is an Australian theologian. He wrote the book Keep Christianity Weird. And he's just simply saying, don't give up what makes us distinctive when we come together.
Yeah.
We sing. We lift our hearts and our minds towards God, not towards what's coming for lunch or our work or our family. As important as those things are, we're saying our utter devotion, our highest aim is God. And we can do that. And, you know, if we do that in a way that there's a great song called The Stand where it just says, I'm going to stand with hands high, heart abandoned. There's kind of this picture of I'm just waiting to hear from God, and I don't really care what anyone else is thinking about. So it's just this beautiful picture of waiting for revelation. And for those who can prepare themselves, we're going to finish with the preparation, but for those who prepare themselves, then God will always come through and reveal himself to you. But we were going to go on to saying we have revelation, and it could be through music or through a testimony and the other things that happen as part of our life and fabric at church. But it's then the context of relationships where God can do his work, which can be a lasting work, you know, bearing fruit, but lasting fruit.
Yeah.
So you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, look, I think, and look, those of you who know me, you know, I kind of beat that drum a lot about relationships, and, you know, Jesus came preaching a gospel of relationship, and, you know, it's interesting, the first thing he did, one of the first things, you know, sets up a team, sets up a relational network in which he's going to, you know, teach and raise them up, you know, and they did, didn't they? They changed the then known world. But this relational aspect of our Christian faith, and yeah, there's no doubt that we have to take account or give an account of our own individual life before God now and before God in time to come, but not at the expense of connecting relationally and helping each other. I guess coming out of Revelation, helping each other. I've used that word accountability. You know, I've always had a prayer partner for as long as I can remember. Probably my late sort of teenage years. There's always been someone that I've had that I'm accountable to in my prayer life, accountable to in my reading and study, in preaching, and you know, I've always found that to be a great source of strength and encouragement, because the reality is I don't think we're designed to be individual and to experience and engage in our faith with God. You know, you look at Paul, you know, he had Timothy. You know, you look at David, had Jonathan. You look at a lot of these Bible characters, and they were in relationship with other people. You know, Paul and Silas, or Aquila and Priscilla, and you know, there's this relational dynamic in which they're engaging and journeying their faith together. And I think for us, you know, here at MCC, we're talking about the work of God coming out of worship and the Word. And sure, you can action it yourself. And some people are disciplined that way. I think of my daughter, my oldest daughter. She, you know, in terms of her study and the way she approaches life, not that she doesn't have relationships, but, you know, she's disciplined and, you know, incredibly disciplined and incredibly hard on herself, and, you know, doesn't let things slip by. But not everybody's like that. And I think the beauty of a Christian community is that it's not so much as holding each other accountable in terms of watching over each other and, but being there as a support to say, hey, if God's speaking to you about something, if God's calling you to do something, talk that through with someone. Make yourself accountable. I mean, it's good to journal and pray, but that sort of person of accountability that you can submit things to. I know we were talking before about prophecy, I'm always happy for people to prophesy over my life and speak into my life. I had a friend ring me last week or the week before, and he's got a little prophetic class going, and he said, could our students, would you be, come on Zoom and they'll prophesy over you, said, yeah, sure, I'm happy for that, What am I going to do with that though? I'm not going to suddenly go out and sell my house and do this, that or other, We'll put them on the shelf, but I'll communicate, share them with a few other people, mainly my wife, because she was keen to know what did they say?
Yep.
Yeah, I shared. We put it on the shelf. If it's of God, He's going to bring it to pass anyway. Yep. But it's good to have another perspective, a third person, a third voice, to be able to bounce things off.
And I think that's really important, particularly in our culture. In the culture of the Bible, they were a lot more focused on community. And so when you read Scripture, often when we read the you in Scripture, you and I would read it as individual. But nearly always, in fact, 95% of the time, it's actually plural. And so sometimes I do the Jeff Fennick where it's yous. Yous should focus your hearts and minds. Yous should focus your life on heaven. So that push against the individualism is quite hard, because if we found out something in our normal life, and I'm not making that different to our spiritual life, but in the usual course of things, if I find something out, then I'm the one who has to do something about it or not. It's an individual exercise. Our culture promotes that, to have made it myself and to have done it all. Whereas the Bible has always been pushing towards relationships. It's no accident, 55 times is the word one another. To love one another and to care for one another and to rebuke one another and to teach one another and to carry each other's burdens. Over and over and over and over we're told, hey, we're not in this alone. This journey is not an individual trip, but it's a journey that we take together. And when it comes to the work of God in our hearts, even as the preacher, sometimes on Monday about lunchtime I struggle to remember what I said. So let alone those who had to sit maybe in heat, or who knows what other distractions there were. But it's so easily lost in the business of life of what God said. We need someone else who will help. I really love the way that a mentor of mine, Mike, says. He goes, when we're talking about accountability, it's about low control. I'm not the one who's telling you what God is saying to you. That's not, God is revealing himself to you. You're the one who's a child of God. You're the one who has his spirit in you. He's the one who's speaking to you. You're the one who says, I think this is from God. That's low control. I'm not telling you whether it's from God or not.
Yeah.
But I will hold it accountable, because if you really do think it's from God, then God always comes through.
Yeah.
And so it's always good to have someone who can say, okay, well, how's that going? You said this was going to happen.
Yeah.
What's happening? And it's a journey that we take together in the context of relationships.
I love that, Heath. So low control, but
high
accountability.
Yeah,
that's the one. That's it, church. Low control.
Yeah.
Even as pastors here, low control, not micromanaging and not manipulation. Low control, but high accountability.
Yeah.
What have you done with that revelation? What have you done with that? Another story here. Years ago, I was in a church, and I've been in church all my life, but when I was younger, in my early teenage years, there was a move of the Spirit, let's call it that, a move of God, and it came out of, I think it came out of the States or Europe, and it was a manifestation. They use these sort of manifestations of the Spirit, and I don't know how to describe it other than saying that in the church services we'd have, people were laughing and falling over and crying, and there was all these demonstrations or people responding to the Spirit of God. And to be honest, I didn't like it. I just thought, this is wacky. This is I don't know what it is, but I certainly didn't engage in it.
Sure.
And but I probably at the time wasn't that engaged in church anyway. But years later, I was the youth pastor in a church, and it came around again. As often some of these works of God, they come around again.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, oh no, here we go again. And I remember people are laughing and crying and rolling around on the floor, and it was like, yeah, this is what is this? And I think there were a few things that happened there. The preaching of the word took a back seat, and I didn't like that. And it was all about one big altar call. One big come in and just praying for people and they're falling over, and it was like, yeah, I'm going to check out of this. And I was the youth pastor. And then I was sitting there and I remember saying to God, I've seen it all before. And I didn't like it when I saw it before, and I don't like it now. And then it was like God just clearly, I heard God say to me, you've seen it all before, but you didn't, and you haven't experienced it before. And I thought, wow, okay, God, you're wanting me to open up to what you're doing. I'm not sure if it is you doing it, but okay, I'll kind of open my heart a little bit. And I did, and I'll tell you what happened. I was sitting in a Sunday night service, and there's all this stuff going on, people standing on chairs, and, it was just a bit out of control, I thought. I don't even think pastors knew what to do with it, but...
No.
What do we do with this, People start building conferences on it and writing books on it, and it was like, okay. Yeah. But I'm sitting there, and then I felt God say to me, I want you to get up out of your seat, walk out the building, and then run. Just start running. And I'm thinking, no, this is, But it was clear to me, and I can't deny that. Yeah. And so I just got up. I remember Beth was sitting with me, and I just didn't say anything to her. I got up, walked outside. I still remember, it was Lumia, Holylee Road. And I just walked out of that church building, and I just started running.
Straight past Krispy Kreme, by the way.
Yeah, past McDonald's.
Denny's. Denny's was out there then.
They're all there. And our church was right in the middle of all that food thing.
Right.
And I just ran, and I ran, and I ran, and I just started weeping and running and weeping and just shouting out to God. And it kind of finished after sort of 15, 20 minutes, and I kind of gathered myself together and then came back in, sat in church, and of course, later on that night, where'd you go? You'd had enough and went and got a coffee. No, this is what happened to me. And it was like, as a result of that, it was kind of like, what was the purpose of that? But I tell you, what I felt was like this release. I really don't know how to describe it other than I felt like I came into a newfound freedom and a release. And I think the tears as well. I mean, they do say, don't they? Tears are very... that release.
Cathartic.
Cathartic,
I'm the big word guy.
Release,
so,
or dolphins, or...
Yeah, I don't know.
Whatever they are,
Yeah, dolphins, yeah.
So maybe that was something there, but certainly, I just felt, okay, I'm going to be obedient and see what happens, Hey, it happened once in my life.
Yeah.
But it's interesting what does happen if we're willing to... And I shared with people after who had similar experiences. Wasn't it if I was the only one? But hey, God calls you to do something, you act on it, share it with others, and
And if you think that's very strange, then please look into the history of one of our congregational forebears, Jonathan Edwards, probably the premier United States theologian who came out as a Congregationalist out to the Americas. When he preached and revival happened, he had exactly the same kinds of things happening in his meetings. Wow. He didn't know what to make of it either. But all he did, and apparently he just stood there and he read his notes. He was boring, apparently, but God was moving. God was using the words that he was saying and the songs that they were singing to bring about his work, and it looked completely different to anything that had happened before or since, probably. But that's the way that God operates. He wants to work in us, and I'm not going to control what happens, but we're going to keep accountability, which is the really important thing.
I think that creates a safety net as well, hey?
Yeah, definitely.
Rather than just running off and doing your own little thing, and then trying to build some sort of theology on it or build some sort of discipline out of it. Okay, we've all got to run now.
Exactly.
And that's what we're going to do as a church.
There's no burning bush ministries. Moses didn't set that up.
That's right.
Although if he lived in America in the 60s, he may have. But he didn't.
That's a good point. It only ever happened once.
It only ever happened once. That's right.
Who's going to deny that?
Yep. There's only been one donkey that ever talked.
So, one donkey that talked.
He didn't fly. But But
Only one son
Yeah.
put on an altar and sacrificed?
Yeah.
So we can't say we're going to start doing that.
Absolutely right. So one of the things that comes with relationships is when we meet again, I've been chewing over how important is it for us to be physically present. Obviously, I think there's something unique about being together, which is not quite the same as online. And I think we all feel it. We might not be able to actually articulate what that is, but there is something about being there. It's like the difference between, I love football and John and this man here loves his football, but different kind. But they actually use feet in theirs, in mine a little bit, and hands as well. But it's not the same as being there as watching it on TV. I feel it's not the same.
Oh, for
and
sure.
I couldn't be able to tell you what the difference is. I mean, I enjoy it, both of them. But there is something about being together, and just this morning heard from Louis Giglio. I mentioned Passion Conference that came out of a result of that song, The Heart of Worship. And Louis said that one of the things that we're called to do is to weep with those who weep and to rejoice with those who rejoice. And he says, and that's always been more prevalent and more, I guess, exciting when we do it face to face. So I just want to encourage you that when we meet again, you might have got into the habit of using online in your pajamas, and it's what a lot of people do, and it's great that that's an option. And it's especially great for those who aren't able to come to church for all kinds of reasons. But when we come back together, we want to be able to share what God is revealing to us as a church. We can't do that if we're not here. And we want to do that in the context of relationships, because we want the work of God to renew us. And you might know our vision to Jesus, to renew all things and to be a partner with that.
Yeah.
So the last question that's sort of asked is, how could we work in partnership with each other and with God to bring that kind of renewal to our weekly gathering, where we're expecting to praise God, to hear from him, and for him to be present and powerful and working with us and in us? What do you think?
Yeah. I got no idea.
Well, we don't know what it's going to look like, do we?
Yeah, I think that's great. It's not just another R word, is it?
No.
But coming out of revelation, coming out of relationships, the word and worship, we would hope that there is renewal.
Yeah.
We would hope that we don't just have standalone individual experiences, but they build. I always think of that scripture, line upon line and precept upon precept. Our faith is built, and our understandings, and we build on them. And so I love that idea of, I'm at the end of next year a different person.
Absolutely.
I've been renewed through worship and the word, and through relationships and accountability. I look different, I sound different, I've grown, So, and if that's what renewal looks like, that's what I used to look like, now I look like this. This is what I used to believe, now I believe this. This is what I used to practice, now I practice this. I practice it a little bit differently. And that might be true for us as a church. We might worship different, we might gather around the word differently, but as long as we're being renewed and ultimately becoming more like Jesus, which is the goal.
What we want to be.
Yeah.
So earlier this week, I went through the book of Acts and looked for some of the descriptions of what happens when the church gathers. Big groups and small, but when there's more than a couple of Christians together, some strange things happen. And these are just descriptions of what happened. I'm sure there are many others that could fill many books. And we're not saying that any of these will be working in our church, because these are just pictures of what God's doing.
Yeah.
What God will do with us, I'm confidently able to say, I'm not sure what he's going to do, but I'm excited to be able to come together and to do it together as we respond to God. So these are some of the things. So obviously conversion, people becoming followers of Jesus at a gathering. So in Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 10, in fact, pretty much every chapter of Acts, there are people responding in faith to becoming followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
So number one, there's baptisms as a result of getting together. One of my favourites, Philip, when he's in the chariot with the eunuch, and they get to the end of it, and there's only a few of them there. There's the retainers for the eunuch, and he says, can I get baptised? And Phil goes, yeah, of course you can. And they do it in the river, right there and then. That was the response.
Beautiful.
Sometimes there's miracles, signs and wonders, and there's testimony and healings. And you can get at a lot of chapters, but look at chapter 5 and 9 if you're not quite sure what happens. One of the responses was generosity. People were bringing money to help other people within their fellowship who were needy. So Barnabas is the stellar example of that, who brought stuff. At the same time, sometimes when they gathered, there was judgment. The very next chapter after Barnabas is Ananias and Sapphira, who both dropped dead in church, which is quite frightening. Because God brought about this immediate judgment to say, can't fool me.
Yeah, wow.
And we don't want to
Didn't
see...
she lie or something?
Yeah, she did. She said, no, this is all the money. And as Peter said, you didn't have to give us all the money, but telling us you did when you didn't,
There we go.
what were you doing? So God can
So don't
reveal...
lie in church.
That's
That's
say,
what
don't
you
lie in
say.
church. Well, don't hide your motivation. Tell us the truth. There was a chance when the church got together and they had a new ministry come out of it, feeding of widows and orphans.
Yeah.
That's in chapter 6. There was a prophetic word by a man called Agabus, beautiful name for children if you want one, and that led to some financial report for a disaster relief. So out of a meeting of church and hearing what God was doing or about to do, they actually saved money and they helped the church in Jerusalem. There's answers to prayer. There's the time when they're praying in the house and Peter gets delivered from prison by an angel of all things, and he goes to the house. And they're not really believing in prayer because he knocks on the door and they don't answer it. Well, actually, the girl answers her and she goes, shuts the door in his face and goes, I think there's a ghost outside. She doesn't believe that God can do it, but he does. He answers prayer. There's the call to mission. People suddenly realise we need to send people to other parts to hear the gospel. Paul and Barnabas gets their part in chapter 13. There's prayer and fasting, which leads to appointing leaders at church.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that they did together. They had dreams and visions as a gathering, which made changes of plans that they had made. This is just some of them. I'm not even getting all of them. Some other fun ones. Singing that led to a prison break. That's in Philippi. That was pretty exciting. There was a Bible study in chapter 17 that started after a gathering. So that's pretty good. People said, let's get together. Let's read the Bible. Let's make sure that this is true. And then there was one where it was a huge sacrifice financially. They gave up pretty much their old jobs because they realised it wasn't honouring to God. You can read about that in Acts 19 in the town of Ephesus. One of our favourites, falling asleep.
Falling asleep.
We've seen that. We know that people fall asleep in our sermons.
Yep.
Thankfully, they don't also fall out of the window and die.
Yeah. And
But, if you want to, we will know. We're going to try and all sneak out once when one of you is asleep, see if we can do it. But there you go. People fall asleep in church from the beginning. And, of course, all of the other things that happen.
what's the lesson out of that?
Well, the lesson is, who knows what God's going to do?
Oh, okay.
But he can
So-
bring change immediate. He can set up something that's new. He can bring about the way that they relate to each other is now different because they've been meeting together.
Okay.
The way they use their finances, the way they do their work.
Sure.
So, in other words, it's not just this Sunday time; it's the whole week gets
Yeah,
changed, and God's doing amazing things.
Cool.
And as a result, Acts tells us people keep becoming followers of Jesus in many ways and varied.
I love it. I'd love to see some of that stuff in our church.
Yeah, well, we've seen
know,
a few of those.
And
Yeah,
we just want to see God at work
absolutely.
and believe that He does want to work through us individually and as a church. And, I just think it's fantastic when you hear the different reports of what's happening in playtime and youth and our, kidscape. And I just think it's fantastic what God's doing. And let's believe when we come out of this lockdown and we're able to meet face to face again, that out of the worship and out of the word, out of relationship and accountability, we'll see God at work as the early church did.
Yep, and that's what we're looking for. The power of God and the presence of God will be with us when we come back together. And we might think, we're not sure if we'll ever get through something like this, but the truth is that God's been faithful. We've got through everything before this that led up to this point, and He will take us and every church through to the next stage. We can trust Him. He knows what He's doing, and who knows what fruit will come. Who knows how many of our friends and family who don't know Jesus think, what was COVID all about? What was the point of that? How did that interfere with my life? Maybe there's something bigger than ourselves, and we have a chance for these things to happen so that others might come to know Jesus. That's an exciting thing. So we're believing for what God has. What about you?
Fantastic. Let's believe together.
Amen.
Amen. See you soon. God bless.
Well, there we go. I've had my workout, I've had my swim. Hope you've enjoyed the service today. Encourage you to have a go at the morning tea link again. I know there's been some problems in the last couple of weeks, but give it a go today. The boys have been trying to make sure all that works properly. Try the one in the email bulletin. If that doesn't work, jump on the website. That one sometimes works better than the one in the bulletin. Anyway, have a good week and thanks for watching. Bye.